Welcome back, everybody, to Who Wears Your Pants. This is Kirsten, and I am here today with the amazing and beautiful Maria Chena Harrison. And she is an incredible woman with such a life experience to share. She was a former professional dancer for Prince and Reba, a SAG actress. I think you mentioned that you were on set with Snoop Dogg, so we'll have to talk about that. She was also a creative director and designer for companies like Cirque du Soleil, and now she is a licensed minister, a doula, a caregiver. She is the founder of Create Her, a women's networking organization dedicated to gathering kick ass women to share their wisdom. And she is also a professional in financial wealth. So we're so excited to have you. I'm like, where to even begin?
So nice to be here. Thank you so much for having me. You're beautiful.
Thank you. Well, okay, so let's start with I'm sure the flashy, fun parts of your life. I know that they all are. But you were an incredible dancer for many, many years. And I was
Yes.
curious, like, if you have any big memories or like, what was that life like, really?
It was absolutely wonderful and magical. And I danced my way out of Buffalo, New York. I was the first girl to leave home without being married in my family.
Mm.
And let alone to leave the state was a huge deal. So it was really magic. I went to Las Vegas to see my brother for university and met a producer on the airplane, and he got me an audition the next day. And I went and auditioned, and I got a job at what was called the Landmark Hotel with a famous choreographer. And I called my parents and said, "I'm not going to university. I'm a dancer in Las Vegas." And you can imagine the response to that. But my mom knew, I had won a lot of competitions in high school, that kind of thing, and so my mom knew how much I really wanted to be a dancer. So she said, "Okay, you can do this, but don't make me wrong. Don't make me wrong because no one thinks I should allow you to do this, but I trust you, and I trust that I've taught you well, and I trust that you're going to make good decisions. So keep your head down. Don't get involved on any of the craziness of Las Vegas and dance." And that's what I did. And I danced in Las Vegas. And then from there, I went to Europe and I went to Asia. And then I came back to America and I moved to Los Angeles. And my first huge job was with Prince. That was my first major kind of arrival job in Los Angeles, and it was for the Diamonds and Pearls era, New Power Generation, and the Cream videos. And we did the MTV Awards, and we did we did our Arsenio Hall show. We did so many things, and it was truly extraordinary. And that really began my celebrity base. I shouldn't say that because I worked with Siegfried and Roy in Las Vegas, and I disappeared twice nightly with them. So I mean, I had a really great dance career, really wonderful. I danced all around the world. I made great lifelong friends. I learned incredible lessons about everything from teamwork to self-sufficiency to how do you go to a doctor in Korea. You know what I mean? What do you say when you're 18 years old and you're feeling a bit off in Seoul, Korea? How do you navigate those waters? So I learned a lot. I had a great time, and my professional dance career just brought me some beautiful a wealth of people that I still hold dear to this day. Just a wealth. Yeah, it was amazing.
Do you think when you were in it, did you realize that you were in it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
when I was in high school, we danced to Rick James because he was a Buffalo guy. So I danced to Rick James, and I danced to Barry White, and I danced to Prince, and I danced to Tina Turner, and I danced, when we know it like teen clubs and that sort of thing. And then, or Hall and Oates was my first concert.
Oh,
And then professionally, I worked with all of them.
wow.
Like I went on to literally work with every single one. I was in Barry White videos. I performed live with him on stage. I did a musical workshop of a Hall and Oates catalog musical. So I got to work with those guys. I worked with Tina live on stage and did, Proud Mary behind her. It really, like, I took a bow one night at Universal Amphitheater with Julie Andrews on one hand and my best friend on the other. So
Mm.
there are these moments and you're just like, oh, thank you. Thank you. You're just living in severe gratitude for all of it. And it was a blast. And as an actress as well, I mean, I had some great experiences. I worked with Francis Coppola, and Gary Oldman. I kissed Keanu Reeves in Dracula. I mean, I had some crazy, wonderful stories that when I look back, I'm so grateful for. I really, it was a beautiful and glorious gift. It was just a huge gift. And I'm so grateful to have been able to do it and to have had the facility to do it and the chutzpah to do it.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think it was about you that, I mean, dance is such an art and, you're using your body, but there's also expression, I guess. What do you think it was for you that made you really stand out?
Um, I think the audacity to be me was a big part of it, because there were girls who were better technical dancers than I was. But I could really live it, and I was fearless in it. And ultimately, I think that having that in whatever it is that you do in life, it's, a dear friend of mine wrote a book called From C Student to C Suite, and Tammy, and she talks about how, if you're kind of average or just a little above average, you tend to work harder, you know, and not rely on your grades to get you there, but you actually have to have the, for lack of a better word, to go to Yiddish again, chutzpah, to get you there. And I think being a person who I didn't complain a lot. Whenever I did, it didn't work well for me. So, you show up, you smile, you be on time, you look great, you dress the part, and you do your job, and you make as many friends along the way as you can, and as few enemies as is absolutely necessary. And with that comes, a tribe of people who will continue to want to work with you. And in my case, choreographers and directors who work with me repeatedly, and other dancers who would refer me to jobs, and a tribe of artists that want to continue working together. And I think that really is a very, very important part. Of course, the technique and the studying is a given. You have to want to work. You
Mhm.
have to be willing to do the work and to work really, really hard. It's not easy. I mean, you're
Yeah.
talking bruises and blisters and cuts and getting dropped on my head and late nights. And, there are lots of crazy stories too. I mean, I've worked with choreographers who were addicted to cocaine and, would only work from midnight till 3 in the morning or midnight till 5 in the morning. So we would be rehearsing late at night, and I didn't do any of those drugs. So, you're talking, falling asleep, standing up, and it's cold, and, there's all kinds of things that go along with it. It's not nearly as all glamorous as it seems, excuse me, but it was a beautiful, beautiful journey, and I'm really grateful for it.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's actually one thing that I am curious about is it does always seem so glamorous, and everything takes such hard work, but there are parts of it that aren't going to be that way.
And there are a lot of no's. There are a
Mm,
lot of no's. You have to be okay with being told no.
yeah.
And I think and not take it as personally as it feels.
Mm,
Sometimes it's just they had too many brunettes, or sometimes it's just you weren't right, or sometimes you remind them of somebody that they didn't like in third grade. You don't really understand all that, and sometimes it's because you suck. You don't. Oh, hopefully you do learn from your mistakes, but ultimately though, you are very much out of control of your life when you are an artist like that, because you're continually dependent on somebody else to give you the job. And
yeah.
after a while, it gets a little dull. After a certain amount of time in the industry, I grew tired of that in particular, and
Yeah.
wanted to make my own way, which is how I ended up, choreographing and then producing, and I produced films and did all that stuff too. So,
Oh my
but it
goodness.
was a wonderful life. It's a wonderful life to be paid to be an artist for, and every year it says on your tax return, artist, entertainer. I used
Wow.
to say entertainer. I don't say that anymore, but I used to.
Well, you did. Yeah, I don't think that's a word that's used as commonly anymore, but yeah, because you kind of did it all.
Yeah, I
Yeah, which
sang.
is
I had a
cool.
record contract. I danced. I choreographed. I acted. I still act. I'm doing a reading this week for a playwright friend of mine, and so we're doing a staged
Mm.
reading of something. Yeah, It was great. It was loads of fun. And as a producer as well, I made my own costumes. I made design costumes for productions, and all of that fed me later on when I started working as a designer and worked with, I was a designer for Cirque du Soleil. I had a jewelry line with Cirque du Soleil, and then they brought me back to be a creative director of another project. So it's been a wonderful, amalgamation of all my experiences. And that's where we are today. That's the Maria you see before you. Is just like the combination of all these crazy and wonderful experiences and not so good experiences. But that's we are. I always say we are kintsugi. Do you know what kintsugi is?
No.
Kintsugi is the Japanese art of repairing. And
Hmm.
it's this beautiful, like they'll take broken pottery or broken porcelain and they repair it with gold bonding, like a gold. So you end up with these pots that are different from the perfect pots they were before, but they are made more beautiful by the repaired cracks.
Mm.
And so I always say, we are kintsugi
Oh, I love that.
because we're made more beautiful by the repaired cracks.
Yeah. Like, is it like streaks of gold kind of, or the
Yeah.
filling? Yeah, yeah.
That
That's
are
beautiful.
unique, that can never be duplicated, right? They can never be duplicated. Well, my cracks are not totally different than your cracks. That's why, you know, being in love with your unique self is so important and so wonderful when you can come to a place that you can say, you know what, I survived. I
Mhm.
survived and I thrived. And I'm grateful for every line, every scar, every wound, good and bad, because they make me who I am. And I'm, it's the lessons, right? It's the journey. So
Yeah. Do you have any like from that whole world, any defining moments, so to say, or like really memorable experiences that you just kind of walked away thinking, wow, that really changed my life?
yeah, I mentioned it earlier. There was a moment I had gone through a super bad breakup. It was probably like, it was one of those breakups where, I came home and he was gone and he'd moved back to Europe and I was just devastated, like on the ground, a mess. Like, pizza boxes and I was just a mess. And I called a friend of mine who was producing a show at the Universal Amphitheater for AIDS Project Los Angeles. And I said, I'm unfit to audition right now. I can't do anything. If I don't get out of this house, I'm going to die.
Mhm.
So I'll get coffee, I'll run paper, I'll do whatever, but get me out of this house. He said, well, I need 4 showgirls and 4 showgirl costumes for Viva Las Vegas with Clint Black. I said, done. So I called my best friends. I called a producer who I know who had these beautiful showgirl costumes, and we showed up at Universal Amphitheater for this star-spangled, you can't imagine all the stars event for H Project Los Angeles. And we did Viva Las Vegas for Clint Black, and Warren Beatty was chatting me up, and it was just Katie Lang was there, and at the end of the show, um, they said, "Okay, take your bow," and so I ended up leading my side of the wings out, unbeknownst to me that I would be met center stage, and I was met center stage by Julie Andrews. So I
Huh.
had my best girlfriend, Lori Ramirez, on my left hand, and Julie Andrews, who was dressed a la Victor Victoria, who again, like I danced to her in high school. Like I did, Le Jazz Hot as a number in my local dance studio that raised me. So I had Julie Andrews on my right, my best friend on my left, and in front of me was Elton John, George Michael, and Tom Hanks. And like you look down the line, and it was just like there were so many. It was like the most star-studded thing I'd ever done. And when I was center stage at Universal, which unfortunately that theater doesn't exist any longer, and I took a moment and I was like, "You're going to be just fine.
Mm.
You're going to be just fine, Maria China." And I never like cried about it anymore. Like I was just like after that moment, I let it go.
Wow.
Yeah,
That is so beautiful.
yeah, it was great. It was a great moment.
And like to think that if you hadn't called your friend up and be like, I need to get out of here, it doesn't matter what I'm doing, just I need to
Yeah,
do something. And that's
and
where you end up.
yeah, and I had no idea what he needed or that he needed showgirls and whatever, which was right up my alley because
Hmm.
I was one. But yeah, it was great. Yeah, that was Bernie Taupin, by the way, the songwriter for Elton.
Okay.
the man who wrote all the lyrics for Elton John's music.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so you have this incredible artistic career, and then what led you to transition into the space that you're in now?
Well, I became a mom. And when I became a mom, my priorities dramatically shifted because so much of the work that I did previously, you're on the road or you're doing out of town gigs or you're on location or you're working nights if it's the theater, even in Los Angeles, you don't get to put your child to bed. So when I started declining work and I really had sort of transitioned out of dance predominantly because of age. I mean, I still do some things every now and then. A choreographer will call and say, I'm doing a commercial, want to come do the commercial. I'll never say no. But I wasn't really dancing so much. I was more acting. And so there was a combination of just wanting to be home and also several things, wanting to be home with my child, not wanting to be dependent or beholden on someone else's opinion to define me or give me work. And also, the kinds of work that I was being offered at that time were not stories that I really wanted to tell. And I found that, I would find myself on sets because, it's a tough thing. I was never a star. I was a working actor. So it's a kind of a tough thing because if you start saying no to things, your agents get really pissy and then they're going to give it to somebody else who starts saying yes. So you start kind of becoming more and more limited. And again, unless you go out and produce your own, which I did, it's tricky. But I found myself, on television shows where like, Criminal Minds, my whole family was killed. Like everybody, the baby, me, like everybody's dead. You know what I mean? I'm like, and when you have a child, suddenly you're like, I don't want to tell this story. This doesn't feel good in my soul.
Mhm.
And at the same time, I was being called to be of service to people who were in transition. Just by, can you please be here? I'm dying. I need you. Can you please be here? I want you here. Can you please come? Like more than one time. And every time I would be called, it was so strange. It was like, of all the people you have in your life, you wanted me here? Yeah, I don't know. I just wanted you here. I'm so glad you're here. And then while I would be there, it was as if I remembered what to do to help them transition,
Mm.
if that makes sense. It was like my knowingness was way beyond this life in this form. It was very old knowingness. So much so that sometimes I would be in a hospital room and I would do something and I would be like, why did you just do that? And I would have to go in the hall when it was an appropriate moment and Google it and see what the hell I just did.
Yeah.
And so I would look it up and it would say, oh, this is a ritual from ancient, China with monks or like different things of that nature. And believe me, it's weird. It's weird when you find yourself there. It's not something that you're like, oh yeah, this is what I do. Like it's just not anything I sought. It definitely sought me. And so when you realize that you're being called, you have to listen. And I was being called.
Mhm.
And I was being called repeatedly. And I still have my nuclear family. Everyone's still alive. And I still have, my husband, thank God, my parents. So, but yet I was being called to help people transition. And I basically helped like a mother figure transition and a husband figure transition and a sister figure transition. And each time I was like, wow, it's really crazy that I'm here. She
Mhm.
had a best friend, she had a daughter, she had this, but yet I'm here. So when you're called like that, you have to listen. And then, of course, I dove deeper and did more work on it, and then got certain certifications so that I would be, just more authentic. I guess. And but then you're there and you're like, oh my goodness, do I really want to spend all of my time helping people transition? Because that's intense. And birthing is wonderful too, but it's also intense. And you're at hours of all day and night. And I never really wanted to pursue those things as a profession, but yet it's a calling. And I
Mhm.
never knew how to charge for those things because how do you charge for angel work? How do you charge for being a light? You can't. I don't know how to do that.
Mhm.
So I would always kind of just call it my angel work, and I still do, and just do it, um, at liberty.
Wow.
Yeah.
And just to be clear for everyone that's listening, when you say transitioning, you're talking about from this life
From
form.
this life to the next. Yeah. From
Yeah.
this life form to helping the spirit transition through to the next form, because we're never really gone. You're just no
Mhm.
longer in this body. Energy doesn't stop.
Mhm.
It just keeps going.
I guess from that experience, I mean, do you feel like it's something that's like flowing through you and you just simply know what to do because, or what does that feel like for you?
Yeah, I just know what to do. I can't explain it. I wish I could explain it more clearly. I mean, I can't explain it because I guess because it found me. I think if you seek things out and you study them and you go and you seek out that wisdom, you can understand how you got there. But a lot of the wisdom that I have, I don't. It just is. I have some audio audio gifts as well, where I can feel and sense spirit and can hear spirit. So
Mm.
sometimes people who have crossover will come and be like, in my kitchen at 3 a.m, while I'm getting a glass of water, and I'll kind of feel them over my shoulder, and then I'll hear them say, "Hey," especially depending on who it was, like, "Hey, China," and I'm like, "What are you doing here?" Well, you're the only one listening. So then
Mm.
I started getting that kind of thing, which again is really weird. And you go, am I crazy? Am I imagining this? But then you realize that you're not imagining it. And I'm not actually crazy. This is just something that happens. But again, as it happens, and then you start talking to other people and you go, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, that's what happens to me. So
Yeah.
that really set me on a very spiritual path, because I feel as though I feel responsible to share what I'm being downloaded. And so I teach meditation. I'm a spirit guide for one-on-one clients. Again, I don't advertise it that way, but people call me and say, I'm going through something. Can I work with you? And most of the time I say yes, unless it's somebody that I just don't feel like I resonate with. Then I'll say no. But most of the time I'll say yes, because if people are asking for help, you give it, you know.
Mhm.
Um, and so that's when I really founded Create Her as well, because I realized over and over again, when Create Her Network is my women's group, I realized that over and over again, so often in life, we kind of get pigeonholed with the people that we know and the people that we talk to. And our circle becomes, as we age, becomes smaller and smaller. And if you're a mom, you hang out with all moms. And if you're a doctor, you know doctors. And if you're in a realtor, you know other realtors, and so on and so forth. And if you are a busy person with a family family and career, and some of us take care of parents as well. Like, there's a lot to navigate, and there's less and less time to find that versatility and variety that you enjoyed when you were young, that helped you to expand your consciousness and expand your perspective and your learning and your knowledge base and just your social circle. And it becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. So for me, I believe that the reason my life has been as joyous and as it has been, and I've been able to maintain, is because of the diversity of the people in my life. And so I founded Create Her as a way to bring groups of diverse women together to share wisdom and to exchange stories and to support each other's businesses and to teach each other things, so that, what I can teach you and you can teach me. We are all students and we are all teachers. And it doesn't matter if you're 60 and she's 20, the 20-year-old's going to teach you something. And so I founded Create Her based on that principle. And it's been a wonderful explosion of women. It's
Mm.
been really, really wonderful.
That's amazing. I joined just this morning, so I submitted all of my stuff. And as we've been talking, I'm like, I should tell my mom about this. She's on Facebook. And it's interesting because I think for me, in terms of groups, especially I think when we're younger, like when you're in college and then just shortly after, we spend so much time with people that are only our age.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's so, especially the way that, society is now, where like older, our grandparents are all, living together, and like the families all live in neighborhoods together. So there's so much distance that way that I've really found it beautiful to be able to connect with people that are of different ages, whether it's like small, for me, not so much small children, but like people that are older. I
It's
really enjoy
priceless.
that.
It's absolutely priceless. The what
Yeah.
you will learn from, a woman who's in the sage part of her life, 60 plus, you will learn incredible things, and you will be able to teach her incredible things because you're looking at whether it's technology or social media or just the world through your lens, and be able to say, well, this is how I see it, and I think that's so valuable.
Mhm.
Um, not just not just for the social aspect of it, which is part of it, but also just to be able to exchange, storytelling and wisdom sharing happened in tribal communities over and over and over again. There was the wise man or the wise woman in the community that you could go to get things. But it's like now who do we go to? Well, we go to Instagram, which is great. And there are some amazing people on Instagram, but connect how do you truly connect with everybody? And so with events, I mean, I before the pandemic I was doing live events, and they
Mhm.
were great. I did Skillshare retreats with women ranging in age from 21 to 62. Those were amazing, and to see what the 21-year-old taught, and to see what the 62-year-old taught, and everyone in between, was really magical. um, and so I believe that I believe that the institutionalization of our learning and the institutionalization of really everything from our healthcare to how we live to our food, I mean, everything has really caused this grand partition. But when women in particular come together and work together to strive, I mean, together we rise.
Mhm.
So if we're working together and learning from each other and supporting each other in business and teaching each other about everything from spirituality to money and everything in between, it's going to be an extraordinary blossom of women. And why wouldn't we want that? Because if you have happy women, you have happy moms. If you have happy moms, you have happy babies. If you have happy babies, you have a happier world.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I'm really excited to join the community, and it's createher.com, right? Or on
Createher.com is
Facebook.
the website, and on Facebook it's the group is Create Her with an 8, CRE 8 HER. And yeah, it's we hold classes all the time. I lead classes on meditation and also on financial literacy, which is I'm extremely passionate. You
Yes.
mentioned it earlier about
Yeah.
financial literacy. um, as women, we oftentimes give up our power to our spouses to make financial decisions. I mean, certainly in my generation, that's a big key factor.
Mhm.
Also, in the gig economy, which you and I were talking about earlier, as part of the gig economy, we don't set up 401ks for ourselves very often, and so the younger you start to set money aside for yourself, for your future self, the better off your life is going to be, because you
Mhm.
can eat organic and you can meditate and you can do all these things that will keep you young. But if you don't actually have enough money to survive your old age and to live it well and healthy, the stress is going to kill you. So, oh, somebody just left. Um, so yeah, so I'm very passionate about teaching women in particular how to manage their money and how compound interest works, and what kind of,
Mhm.
even if it's $50 a month, if you're 20 years old and you put $50 a month into an account and you do that every month for your whole life until that 50 can become 100 or 150 or 200, you're going to have millions of dollars by the time you're my age. By the time you're 50, you'll be a very wealthy woman, and you won't be beholden to a job or to a man or to a situation, because so often what happens is we start our careers and we start off really, as women, I'm speaking specifically to women,
Mhm.
we start our careers, and then what happens, we get married, we get pregnant, We become pregnant, which is a glorious thing. We want to be home with our children. So we step away from our career. We step away for an average of about 10 years to be moms until the kid is in, fifth grade. And then we think okay, we can manage to go back to work. But oftentimes it's not even then. Sometimes it's when the kids are 15 or 16. And now what? Now you wake up and you're 55 and you haven't worked in 15 years. And what do you do? So if you have these things in place before you become a mom, whether you become a mom at 30 or 40 or whenever that is, but if you have your money working for you, you have time on your side.
Yeah.
And
I
then
feel like
it's all independence. You don't have to be beholden to your husband who said, I'll take care of you, don't worry. And God willing, that will all work out. But what if it doesn't? And we all know what those statistics are. So
yeah.
I'm super passionate about, setting women up so that they will win financially. And once you have that foundation of the material world, which is unfortunately where we live, like it or not, then everything else, life is a garden. You have to have all these different pillars. You have to have finance, you have to have spirit, you have to have community, you have to have creativity, you have to have, nutrition and movement, all these things. So that's just part of the wheel of life.
It's beautiful. Yeah, and I feel like there are so many different ways, like just even thoughts about this topic in general that I have because like I think even about my family, like my grandmother's now alone and she didn't really wasn't in charge of the finances and now she is. And so like it's just like setting yourself up through every stage of your life for taking on those different changes financially. And
Who
I
wears
feel
your
like
pants, baby? Who wears your
yeah.
pants? I mean, the name of this podcast is Who Wears Your Pants? And the question is, who does wear your pants? Because if
Yeah.
you're giving up your control of any kind, whether it's your body, your finance, your anything, if you're giving up your autonomy, your agency, you will ultimately end up bereft and you will
Yeah.
ultimately end up not in control. And I see it day in and day out with my financial wealth clients. Day in, and I don't care if they had a husband who was a multi-billionaire and he was in control of everything. Well, guess what? Now the business took a turn and now they're being cut back and they realize that the trust owns the house and it doesn't matter what the situation is.
Mm-hmm.
It could be
So
that extreme, or it could be the extreme of a single mom with 3 kids who is working 2 jobs and trying to figure out how to make ends meet and has revolving debt of $50,000. So,
yeah.
it covers the gambit. But if you understand how it works earlier, which no one taught me, by the way, and it's not taught in schools.
Mm-mm.
So if you understand it early on, it'll become so second nature to you to look at your money and your finance in a healthy way, that just as it's second nature that you don't drop trash on the ground any longer, or
Yeah.
you don't mean those basic concepts, which when I was a kid people would still throw trash on the ground, right? We would still let balloons go, and now you're like, don't let a balloon go, it'll go into a river, like all these things that are innate now, but that's because we were taught them. And
Mhm.
so
So I guess what thinking about that, like do you have any things that you automatically think if you're gonna do something today, like what would you do to get your finances set at least in the right track of being on order?
the first thing I would do is go through your credit card statements every single month and get rid of all those stupid little memberships that you don't use for the apps and the thises and the that's that you don't even remember what it was. If you can't remember what a charge was or even how you spent that money, then you're doing something wrong with how you're spending. You're being an emotional spender and an impulsive spender, and that's the
Mhm.
same as being an impulsive eater. You're going to be fat if you're an impulsive eater. If you're an impulsive spender, you're going to be broke. So it's the
Mhm.
same. It's kind of the same psychoses, if you will. I know that's not the right word, but it's the same mindset that makes you overeat, overspend, over sex, over whatever it is that you're filling that hole with. You have to look at that. So the
Mhm.
first thing I would do is just go in and look at your credit card statements because it's black and white for you. The second thing I would do is really understand why, like try to get to the course of the why you spend. You know, why you felt the need to buy the t-shirt that you didn't really need when you had to have it at that time. You really, really wanted it, and understanding the difference between wants and needs. If you were going to set up, understanding compound interest and how it works for you or against you is super vital. And I do that in my free class on the Create Her Network, and that's on Thursday nights. And it's a basic financial literacy class. We talk about the rule of 72. We talk about, compound interest, and we talk about the difference in types of accounts from taxing accounts today, like stock. You pay tax as soon as you make money. You pay tax. But then there are deferred accounts like 401ks, which you pay tax later on the money when you take it out when you're 65. And then there are tax-free accounts, which are really important, like a Roth IRA. So if you're young and you have the two things that you should do for yourself, I will give you two things that you should do for yourself. One is open yourself a Roth IRA, because you're allowed to put up to $6,000 a year into it. You only need $250 to open it. I have one. It's still compounding in interest. So I believe that's a really important thing to have. And when that money grows and compounds over years, so that by the time you're 65, you can start withdrawing it. When you withdraw it, it's all tax-free money, as opposed to a 401k, which you pay tax on. So having a Roth is super important. And it's easy and it's free, and you can get one through me. You can get one online. You can get one at your local bank. Just make sure that you're paying attention to the fees and the historic growth of that type of Roth. So that's the first thing. The second thing is having an insurance policy for yourself that will cover you should you become disabled or have a chronic illness. And something, I love the IUL policies, like a nationwide IUL policies, because they have cash accumulations that then again you can use for retirement, and they have long-term care attached to them. And when you're young, they're really cheap. Yeah. And you have like all those years for that money to compound in interest. And by the time you get to be, 50 or 65 years old, you can end up having an extra $1 million, or more, depending on how much you set aside. And that is also tax-free. So there's a lot of, those are probably the two biggest things that I wish somebody had just taken me by the hand when I was cashing $15,000 residual checks from my mailbox and buying sunglasses and handbags that, haven't appreciated or got lost. Those would be the first two big things that I would do. Awesome. If I were talking to my 21-year-old self, as I started off on my career, I would say, do those two things, do them religiously. And we always hear the adage, pay yourself first. But when you're a gigger, you think paying yourself first is going out for a really great sushi dinner and buying yourself some stuff that you don't need, or that you think you need, right? Because, especially when you're younger and, you think your clothes define you, or your labels define you, or whatever. For me, it was handbags and sunglasses and shoes, right? So if I had the sunglasses on, then I looked like a starlet because I had the Gucci sunglasses on, It didn't matter that I didn't have $400 in my purse. I was carrying a $3,000 bag, all those things. Well, as you age and you look back at your life, you go, it doesn't really define you. It really, really doesn't define you. And those things are all wonderful, providing your foundation is covered, providing you're not going into debt to look like you have something that you don't. So, that's just, that's like hindsight wisdom, right? But if I can share it and I can impart it to young women everywhere, and young people, not just women, but young people everywhere, the world will be better.
Well, and I think it's, as we've been talking, I'm like, I feel like having wealth is such like a sexy thing, and like everybody wants it. But like talking about your IRA and compounding interest, like putting these things away, it's not, but it's what you have to do if that's what you want to have, right? And I just find that it's interesting, especially in society today, how many people are in debt. And it's like almost become this like normalcy to have like huge student loans, or
well, because that's what we do. We set our kids up to be able to, we teach our children how to cope and maintain debt. We send them into the world with hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt in beginning of their life because of student loans. So we are being conditioned to be enslaved to the banks. We are just being conditioned to constantly pay whatever that percentage is. And if you look at how money compounds and how percentages compound in interest, it's really like, I always talk about like the Victoria's Secret credit card, right? Like when you're a young woman, what was your first credit card? Like mine was Macy's, right? I got a Macy's card and it was everything because I could go and buy stuff at Macy's, right? Or Victoria's Secret because you want to have pretty underwear and pretty bras or whatever. Those credit cards charge almost 30% interest.
Wow.
So, in order to figure out how quickly that amount will double, you would divide the interest rate into the number. So I didn't know I was going to do this today, but we'll give you guys a little lesson on the rule of 72. So the rule of 72 is if you take the interest rate and you divide it into the number 72, it will tell you how long it will take that money to
Oh.
double, right? So if you've got, let's say, a 29% interest rate and you would divide that number into 72, that money is going to double every 2.5 years. So
So
if you
that
buy
that a
$120,
lingerie.
if you buy that $120 bra or whatever it is, and you think you're getting a score because you're getting the 15% off at the register, if you don't pay that off at the end of the month, that $150 purchase will become a $325 purchase within 2 years.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm really funny because I am incredibly frugal. Like, I think the first credit card and pretty much the only credit card I ever had was like Chase Bank.
But I
Like,
promise you, even with Chase Bank, they gave you a really crapo because you're a new
oh,
credit
probably.
score. So I'm sure they gave you a really paying attention to your interest rates is
Um,
super, super important because it will make or break you. And if you think you're going to get by paying the minimums, you're not. It
mm,
doesn't work like that because the money just keeps compounding. The interest compounds on interest, compounds on interest, compound on interest. That's why setting yourself up in a IRA or a Roth or a mutual fund when you're young, or your life insurance policy when you're young, you have all that time for that stuff to compound because your money starts making money. Well, it's
mhm.
the same in the reverse. Your debt starts making debt, starts making debt.
Yeah.
So get rid of your high rate, pay off those high interest loans first, those high interest cards first, consolidate into something lower, stop spending. Yeah,
You mentioned something earlier. I think it was before we started recording, but about the shame and like, the emotions that are revolved around money. And I would love to
absolutely.
hear a little bit about that.
Well, being a roller, being like, I got this, I'm making money, I'm a roller. Like you see it time and time again with whether it's celebrities who go broke, right? How many
Mhm.
celebrities do we see, or athletes who go broke because they have to maintain this lifestyle and they have to maintain this roller thing and pick up the check or whatever. The same thing happens with everyone. It's all relative. So if you have been earning and earning and earning, but spending and spending and spending and don't have anything to save, there's shame in that. There's like shame in that. If you're carrying a boatload of debt on your shoulders that you think nobody knows about, you wear it like a coat, and there's shame in that. It's heavy. It's heavy. It makes you make decisions in your life that perhaps you wouldn't otherwise have made, but you have to make them because of finance. You become enslaved. Like I call it, wife slavery, right? The woman who stays with the man because she can't afford to leave.
Yeah.
Or conversely, that it's cheaper to keep her mentality. Like the guy who won't divorce her because he doesn't want to let go of his cash.
Yeah.
Like all these things. So it doesn't matter what age you're at. Like even if you're young, you could be like, oh, my parents didn't have money. I don't come from money. I have shame in that. I wish my parents could buy my car or pay my rent or pay for my school, but we don't have that. So there's shame in that. So it doesn't really matter where you are in your life. We all have stories about money, whether it's a parent who controlled us with it, right? Or being robbed of it, being taken advantage of. I remember I had a
Mhm.
boyfriend and he was like, oh, um, I left my credit card. Can you cover me? And I was like, well, I have my rent. He's like, I'll get it for you Monday. I'll go to the restaurant. I'll get it out of the safe. Don't worry. Come on, let's go out. We went out, we got tattoos, we were buying shots, we went for teppanyaki and da da da. I was like 22. I spent all my rent money and all my tip money and all my money. And we had this amazing weekend. And we had an earthquake that weekend as well. And we had all this fun. And Monday came and I was like, "Are you going to go get the money?" And he's like, "Yeah, well, da, 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 da." Tuesday came, and he jacked me for the money. Totally jacked me for the money. So literally he I don't want to
Yeah, now you
swear,
have a tattoo you'll never forget.
but you know what I mean? Like, and he had sex with me. Like, just like all of it. Like, you know what I mean? So it was like, you really feel like, how did I let this happen? So there's so many stories about money. I'm sure if we reached out to your listeners, everybody would have a story about money.
Oh,
Money
totally.
found, money lost, money controlled, carrying debt. Like, so when you talk about shame, I think that's why too, people just don't want to face it. It's like making sure you have a will or a trust. People don't want to face the fact that we're all here for a limited amount of time. They don't want to think about having a will or a trust. They don't want to think about having life insurance or having long-term care insurance because they want to live in the now. I'm just living in the now. Okay, I can understand that too, to a degree, but really what you're dealing with is the shame of not wanting to have to face the fact that you're not infallible.
Mm.
Yeah, so when there's a joke with my contemporaries in the wealth field, like they used to go through so many boxes of Kleenex a week. Now of course everything's virtual, but like they would just keep going through Kleenexes because people would come in and just like cry that they lost it in the stock market, or their 401k crashed, or they lost their job, and who became disabled and they didn't have disability insurance. So now suddenly they're living on government assistance, and they went from having a big house to a smaller house to a smaller house to now being in an apartment, to now living in a state-run facility for the elderly, which you don't want to go to. So it's like all these things, are having to take care of parents because our parents didn't plan. That's a huge one too.
Yeah.
Like your grandmother, you were saying, like, it's just so everybody has shame about it. And I think that's why, when you go into a big organization, like a big fancy wealth management company, who oftentimes won't even look at you if you don't have an excess of $1 million in net wealth. Um, there's shame in having to go to an institution like that. But when you work with clients one-on-one and you make your financial wealth feel a lot more like self-care,
Mm-hmm.
and you make your financial future feel more like nutrition, financial nutrition, rather than junk food, and you put it into context that people find palatable, I'm able to do really good work, and I'm able to really help people um, organize themselves and go. And ultimately, they're like, "Oh my God, thank you so much. I've been wanting to do this for so long, and I was just so afraid. I just kept putting it off. And thank you so much. I feel so much better."
Yeah, like that part, the procrastinating, and then like that
Yeah,
sense of, I think sometimes for people it might be, it's almost overwhelming to think about all of the things that you would have to do. So then instead of doing just one of them, you do none of them and just pretend like that wasn't a thing.
paralyzed. You're paralyzed.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what we do is like I usually like I do an overview, and I do it for free. I'm with my, it's called No Woman Left Behind. Although I do it with men too, but my movement's called No Woman Left Behind. I do a free financial like health checkup, and we just look at your stuff and we go, okay, you do this, you do this, you do this. You have this coach, you have that coach. How are they helping you? How are they benefiting you financially, etc. You have these expenses. How does that help you? Let's see where we can trim. Let's see
Mhm.
what hemorrhaging we can stop, where we can stop the bleeding, right? And that's like the first step. And then we look at, how much money you're going to need just to maintain your current life
Yeah.
if God forbid something should happen to you.
This is
And so
this
we
is
do that, and it goes step by step, and we just keep building, and we just keep building, and we just keep building. And it takes, it doesn't happen in a week. It takes probably, I would say, 2 months to really get a full prospectus, because sometimes we have to get you out of debt
Mhm.
first. So that could take up to 6 months, really, depending on what kind of how we repackage your debt.
Mhm.
Sometimes we can make it go away quickly. Sometimes it takes a little time. Sometimes we just get it reduced. But once we are able to free up some cash for you, then we can start. Then we can start navigating wealth. Then you
Mm.
start navigating wealth instead of navigating debt. So you
Yeah.
have to at least be at net zero before you can start navigating wealth.
Yeah.
But even if you are in debt, you can still start your what we call the buckets. You can start your short term, your long term, and your mid term bucket.
Mhm.
Even if it's $25, $25, $25, you have to. There are certain things every person needs to have, like an emergency fund, and before you pay your light bill, you have to pay yourself.
Mhm.
Because if you're not here and you're not okay, the lights don't matter. So you have to pay yourself.
Yeah. When you were talking about doing like basically an audit on your finances, I will not, this is a story that I had that I will never forget. This is like years ago, but I was going through actually for the first time my credit card statements in a while, and I saw this really bizarre transaction, and it was for like a credit check. I don't really remember the company. And I was like, what is this? And then I pull it up and I realized that every month I was being charged $25 for like 3 years. And it was for, I had to get a credit check to move into an apartment. And so I
And they hit
signed
your
up.
credit card every month.
And then it was like, it was one of those things in fine print where they're like, we'll charge you if you don't cancel. And then I didn't realize it. I had blown like $1,000 without even knowing.
They just found that out with the Trump campaign. Did you know about that? The Trump
No.
donation campaign. Yeah, there was that little box that was checked that said we will, take this donation monthly. And so you got all these people and all their credit cards got, bang, if you call it banging the credit card. You know,
Oh
all these
God.
people got all these credit card charges from making what they thought was a one-time donation to
Oh
the
my
Trump
gosh.
presidential campaign.
Oh
I
my
know.
gosh. It well, and it's crazy because I feel like these things happen a lot, but it taught me two things. I was like, okay, well, first of all, I need to make sure that I'm checking this stuff out, but also it made me realize I didn't feel that $25 every month, but it ended up being a significant amount of money like that I could have had and like invested in something, instead.
Yeah,
So
if
it's
you'd
kind
put
of a
it into a
reminder like,
mutual if you'd put it into a Roth or a mutual fund, it would be getting, 10, 12% annual interest and
yeah,
so on and so on and so forth. You would have had a lot of money there.
yeah.
Instead, it was on a credit card, so you're being
It was
charged for it
it,
besides. So it actually cost you more than the $25 because if you didn't pay your credit card off, you were paying the $25 plus the interest, plus that interest compounded. So yeah,
oh
it's
man,
so
yeah.
important to know your numbers. It's so important to know your numbers. And I'm speaking from experience. My filing system was always a stack of letters, stack of mail on my countertop that I
Oh
would, open every 3 months, right? As a younger person, I would open it every 3 months. Now it's like, it's all at our phone now, guys.
yeah.
So there's no excuse. There's
No,
no
yeah.
excuse to not know how much you have in the bank every day and can make money your friend. If you respect it, it will respect you.
Mm.
How much do you have? How much is it going? What are things really? What's the real cost of that splurge at TJ Maxx or Neiman Marcus or wherever it is you splurge or a restaurant? What is the real cost of that?
Amazon, yeah.
Amazon, whatever, Wish, whatever your habit is, right? We all have
Yeah.
habits.
Well, I know we're like about to run out of time, but I'm like, if we can like bookend this, do you have any, going back to like the very beginning of our conversation about your experience with all these artists, like who was like your favorite person to work with, or if you have any, like a funny story from somebody or an experience that you had?
Oh my goodness, there are so many. I mean, I danced with James Brown and I jumped up around his waist and he spun me around and that was amazing. I danced with Rick James when I had braces on my teeth and he'd say, "Baby, don't smile, don't smile." I was in a Chevy Chase movie with called Vegas Vacation, and I played a casino cashier, and I really wanted to play it as a character role. And so I kept adding like New York accents and bad hair and gum and bad makeup. And the producer, his name was Jerry Weintraub, he was a very famous producer. He said, "What happened to you? Why do you look like this?" And I said, I wanted to be a character. And you have a lot of pretty girls in your movie. I just thought it would be fun to be a character. He said, honey, we hired you because you're pretty. Stand there and say the line. So that's a good one. What else? On the set of Dracula, I met Sir Anthony Hopkins, and I was telling him I had just seen Free Jack, which was a very unnotable film with him and Mick Jagger. And he said, oh, how was it? I said, well, I don't think he'll be winning any awards for that one, but it was entertaining. And so we had a laugh, and then he came to my ear and he said, well, darling, you'll have to excuse me now. I'm having an old friend for dinner.
Oh, God.
And I was like, ah! So I had that experience. I did a movie with Snoop Dogg, and, when you're with Snoop, you participate in, you live in Snoop land for a minute. So I had that experience. That was really good fun. And he rapped about me. He actually freestyled, and he freestyled with my character name, which was Mrs. Silverstein. And it was for a film called Falling Up, The Golden Door, Falling Up. And my character's name was Mrs. Silverstein. So he freestyle rapped to Mrs. Silverstein and how hot Mrs. Silverstein was. That was cool.
You're like, tell your kids about that one. Snoop thinks I'm hot, so it's good.
Snoop thought I was hot. So, I guess I've arrived. And he was pretty hot too, though. He was surprisingly and disarmingly charming and incredibly smart and quite a gentleman. He was a cool guy. Really cool guy.
Yeah, he seems like he would be.
Yeah, and it was really interesting because the first time I did the MTV Awards, he was on the MTV Awards. And he was just coming on the scene. And he and his dancers were so intense. And they were like Kikuyu tribe people. They were like really intense ghetto, thug life. And the energy was so dark and heavy and intense that it was like a little scary, to be around. And then to meet him all these years later, and he was just like this lovely, light, hilarious, funny, charming, just a super, super smart man. I was shocking. And I will admit I had a bit of a crush. I'm not going to lie. I did. I was like, wow, Snoop's got something going on for sure. Yeah, it was cool. Is that enough stories? I think that's enough
like,
stories.
I could listen to them all day. But yeah, I mean, thank you so much. You have just such a breadth and a depth of knowledge and experience, and it's amazing to have met you. I mean, I would love to meet you in person one day. So I guess I have two questions. Where can everybody find you? I know we've talked a little bit about some of the things that you do. And so if you want to share where you're at.
So you can find me on createher.com, which is my website, which is createher, createher.com. You can also find me on Facebook. My name is Maria China, Cina. You can find me on Instagram under Mama China, because that's what everyone calls me, Mama China. You can find me on Clubhouse, which is where I had the pleasure of meeting you, my beautiful girl. And if I can be of service or help anyone with whether it's their spirit work or their finance, or you want to join my women's organization and you're a female business owner, I'm also building a directory of female-owned businesses because I believe strongly that we should be fishing in each other's ponds. So I'm building a directory for that. And for now, that is free to join. So yeah, find me and come and say hi.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing. I love it. And so my final question is, that I ask everybody, who wears your pants?
I do. Unless my husband takes them off, of course. And then sometimes he wears them just for a laugh on a Friday night. But I wear my pants for sure.
Oh my goodness, I love it. Well, thank you so much. It was a true pleasure to have you.
It was glorious to be here. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be on the path with you, my dear.
Thank you so much. Woo, we did it. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Who Wears Your Pants. Please do me a favor and hit subscribe. Leave me a review or a comment so that I can turn this disaster of a show into something great. I need you. No, seriously, I do. And if you're feeling really invigorated, check out my corner of the interwebs at kirstentrammell.com, or let's get really social on the gram at Kirsten__Trammell, because as a ginger, I need all the friends I can get. Peace and love, my homies. I will see you next time.